Hello, and thank you for coming to MICE. Thank you for coming to the MICE panel programming. I want to say a special thank you, acknowledging our host and sponsor, Lesley University Art and Design. This is the 10th year that Lesley has hosted MICE, so thank you very much. Thank you, Lesley. I also want to say that MICE is produced by the Boston Comic Arts Foundation, or BCAF. BCAF is a 501c3 charitable organization that we started a few years ago when we realized we needed MICE to be a nonprofit to accept donations. But rather than just 501c3 MICE, we created the Boston Comic Arts Foundation as an organization that could grow and support and encourage the art of independent comics in general in the Boston area and beyond. We have we've assisted and supported now in a couple of smaller shows. I keep saying smaller, newer shows. They're probably smaller too for now. The Boston Kids Comics Fest, which will have its third show this spring. Comics in Color, which will have its first show in spring 2020. And also Pod Tales, which is actually a dramatic podcast convention, which is going to be held for the first time next door at Lunder Hall tomorrow as sort of a little sibling show to MICE. So if you like dramatic podcasts, I understand there's going to be some superstars of the drama podcast scene there tomorrow. I don't know who they are, but they're great. So my name is Dan Mazur. I'm not Cathy Leamy, the moderator, because Cathy Leamy, unfortunately, was taken ill, and at the last minute, I'm stepping in, totally unprepared. If I succeed, it'll mean that moderators will become obsolete, and everything will be moderated by an app from now on. But anyway, I'll still try to succeed. Welcome to the developing graphic memoir, putting my story into panels. I've been very involved with the development of this panel, but not with the questioning. So we have with us today 5 wonderful comics memoirists who will now come one at a time, either up to the podium or staying where they are, depending on what they feel like, and talk about their work for a few minutes before we go into a question session. And we will start with Travis Dandro.
Hello?
You know what? And I'm supposed to introduce you.
Oh, okay.
See what I mean? Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Travis Dandro. Travis Dandro is a cartoonist from Leicester, Massachusetts, just outside of Worcester. He started drawing his first comic strip, Twerp, for the local newspaper when he was 13 years old. Since then, he has continued drawing comics, and this past August, his graphic novel / memoir, King of King Court, was published by Drawn and Quarterly. So now, Travis, you may talk. Everybody, mics on? Should work now?
Hello? Okay.
Yep.
Am I talking about my book?
Yes, talk about your book and just tell us about it and what you did and
All right.
why.
So, around 2014, I was having some major anxiety problems, and I ended up going into counseling. And during counseling, I started talking about my childhood for the first time, which was fairly traumatic, mostly because of my relationship with my father, who struggled with depression and was addicted to heroin. And so I thought going to counseling would help me, but it actually made me feel a lot worse, which I guess is not so uncommon with some people. Talking about what happened made it seem more real to me. So after about a year of counseling, I ended up quitting because it wasn't working, and I was waking up during the night with panic attacks and unable to sleep. And that's when I started drawing this book, just as a way to kind of deal with the emotions of what had happened, and it made me feel a lot better. And so the more I drew, the better I started to feel. And 2 years later, I had a book completed.
There's a copy of it over there. We can hold
Yeah.
Wow.
Here it is.
Holy schmoly. That's
So,
thick.
yep. And that's it.
Thank you. And now we will move on to Laura Meilman. Meilman? Meilman. Laura Meilman. Oops. There we are. Laura Meilman is a painter and cartoonist based in Cambridge. She studied fine arts in undergrad as well as illustration at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts and attended a summer workshop at the Center for Cartoon Studies. As a fine artist, she is most well known for Project Teascapes, in which she visited and made a drawing at each stop on the T. She is a member of the Graphic Memoir Collective and is currently working on her first memoir. At MICE this weekend, she is debuting a zine of short comics as well as the first chapter of her memoir.
Thanks so much, everybody. So I've been making cartoons of myself since at least middle school, just really funny things, little drawings of like cartoon me, experiencing funny situations that are true to my life. And I've also, in recent years, done a lot of drawings of little cartoon me processing anxieties in funny ways, usually. And yeah, some of them have more of this look here, which is very like, you know, with focusing on the figure and like white background. But I also have ones that feel more like within a fleshed out world. And I've taken a lot of those little anxiety comics and put them into a zine that I have for the first time. So I'm excited about that. And the memoir project, the longer form memoir project I'm working on, has to do with a year that I lived with a group of particularly memorable roommates. And I hope it's going to be relatable, yeah. So lots of like mid-20s sort of living with people, learning to be an adult kind of antics. And one of those roommates and I had some serious romantic tension. So there's some heartbreak that's going to be in there. There's some you know, unrequited infatuation, which I think is, you know, I'm not the only one who's experienced something like that. And that's what I appreciate about memoir is all of our experiences are unique to us, but there's something so universal about them too. And I am very thankful to the Graphic Memoir Collective that I'm a part of for critiquing my work. They've really shaped it in ways that I couldn't have done alone. So thanks.
Good. Marty Moyer. You're going to stand, and I'm going to stand here. Oh, but I'm going to introduce you for each thing. Marty Moyer was a high school math teacher in the Newton public school system for 22 years. She retired to explore her passion for storytelling both on stage and in sequential art. She was in the finals of the 2019 Mass Mouth Storytelling Competition, and she will appear on national TV, the WGBH World Channel, Stories from the Stage, October 28th. She also founded the Graphic Memoir Collective 2 years ago. Marty feels some stories are better represented in art, and this is the case for her graphic memoir, The Broken Meditation Garden, debuting at MICE this weekend.
Yay. right, so that's the cover of the book, and that's my family, and me on top. It looks just like me, right? Okay, so I changed the names and physical appearances of everybody in my family, and they're quite grateful for that. My name in the book is Claire Wilcox, and what the book is about is my first teaching job 25 years ago. On the first 3 days of the job, I had a bipolar psychotic episode in front of 9th graders, and you can laugh. Ended up in the hospital. They kicked me out of the hospital too soon, then thrown in to live with my mother, who did her best. And so we can go to the next slide. This is the Memoir Collective. As I said, my book, I started that 25 years ago. That's a long time, and I was just not getting through the brick wall. So I heard of Grub Street and Eve Bridberg, who's the founder and the executive director of Grub Street, and how she does memoirs and writing and has her feedback policy. And I thought, let's try this for cartoons. So I put it out there. These people showed up. 2 people that are not here, Lena Olson and Haida Solberg. And the feedback is one where you submit your material and you listen to them talk about it, and you cannot say a word. And for the first 10 minutes, they give you positive feedback. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. This one, I heard things when I was listening to them talk, things like, oh, I can just smell that apartment. And, ooh, rookie mistake, the bong is on the floor, he's gonna spill the water. And how many cats are there? And they liked this page, and it gave me confidence to continue with this style, but they also said you don't have to be this detailed, because I did want to get the book done. It's already been 25 years. So the next slide will show you one that I got feedback that was very helpful. They said, who is she? Why is she on the couch? Who's that woman? Did she turn into a cat? Why is she hitting her? And is she the mother, the maid? And it was really confusing to one of my members, the last panel, like what she's talking about, how in her time, I can't even see it, but somebody could. She had 3, she had 3 kids, she didn't have time for naps or vacations and blah, blah, blah. And then when she had cramps, she beat her kids. And so she was productive. The feedback I got didn't discourage me. It was just, okay, I need to build a foundation. They need to know who Claire is, how old she is, what she's sick with, who this woman is. And the 2 years has been extremely helpful, and I never would have finished the book, which I actually finished, without you guys. Thank you.
Any words on this slide?
Oh, yes, they helped tremendously. They're my 2 cats, and every character in the book has a cat, at least one. So they posed.
And now, Barbara Thomas and Tim Wall.
We're going to sit. I found the slides.
You're going to sit. Okay. Barbara Thomas and Tim Wall, starting with Tim Wall. Boston-based illustrator Timothy Wall has been doodling since the early 70s, when he first surprised his mother with a cartoon of a mermaid with a penis and breasts. Timothy has had a long career as a software architect, building and securing large software systems, but has always found time to devote to his visual interests in animation, video games, and various forms of design and illustration. Timothy Wall, ladies and gentlemen. A native New Yorker, Barbara Thomas has lived in Cambridge for over 2 decades. An avid writer since her childhood, her stories fell into the categories of horror, erotica, speculative fiction, Afrofuturism, and the Caribbean diaspora. Barbara holds a degree in chemical engineering from MIT and runs Artifact Soapworks and teaches soap making. When not writing, Barbara is a Cambridge Women's Commissioner, a member of the FBI Citizens Academy, an active member of the Improv Boston community, a scuba diver, a voiceover artist, and a model.
Woohoo.
And they are both members of the Graphic Memoir Collective.
All right, so this is the book that we have downstairs. This is our first time at MICE and our first time on a panel and our first foray into everything. So thank you.
This was a long time getting off the ground. It's doing a book together, something we'd always wanted to do, but couldn't really settle on a story. We'd gone through many ideas, many of which were far too dark or far too unrelatable. We finally settled on something that we could both sort of get excited about and had a lot to say about, and that was raising a kid in Cambridge.
Yeah, and so this is for real. It's us, legit. That's our son. Now he's taller than us and in college. So the reason we never came to MICE is because this material that we're writing about always happened during the week of MICE, meaning his birthday. And his birthday is literally tomorrow. So yeah, he turns 19 tomorrow. And because he's 19 and no longer here, we're naming names. So you can go to the next slide. So we just wanted you to visually read this rather than just like on slide 2. But this is how we work. And being a chemical engineer, I'm very much process oriented. So we're like, we must have a slide showing like paper planes going from one place to the next. But basically we brainstorm, and those are legit how we work. Just coming up with you can talk as much as me.
I was going to talk about the process.
Oh, okay.
But,
all right.
This was a long time evolving, but we have to thank Marty for putting the group together, which really helped us get this process underway.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this didn't exist when we started the group, and this has been the development over the past 2 years to get this so that as a husband and wife, we can actually work
stay married
and not stay married.
Because like I started reading these like textbooks on how to write comic books, and it's like, we must do the Alan Moore way, where I say, and the light is at 2:00 and it must come thusly on the face, and then do the Marvel Comics way, and then none of that was kind of working. So this is how we roll. I basically we brainstorm. And that first piece of paper is like when we were doing Circe, which is an anthology downstairs. We're like, well, we could do Circe, we could do Odysseus, we could do that. So those are just different brainstorming ideas. The next thing, picking a theme. Once we pick the theme, we're like, okay, we're gonna have her be on Ayaya. We're gonna talk about Odysseus. So that we picked Circe. Next piece is like no, don't go to the next slide. So the next thing is, this is just our process. Third piece is just showing like how we generate content. And the way I generate content is I immediately think of all 17 chapters. So I'm like, I have the 17 chapters. I'm like J.M. Strzegnitsky, the guy who did Babylon 5, I have the end.
Which was actually a slight impediment to actually getting started.
Yeah, I'm like, this is the end of the book. And then I do wind up doing the Alan Moore thing, the things that are in color, and like in red, it's like, you will have Connor's face look like this, and you will draw my hair in twists, not braids. You will, so like just things like that. And then I start to draw, which is kind of like at an 8-year-old level, and then Tim takes it from there and sketches and makes things better. Then we refine the narrative, and then we're finished.
And there's a tough part of this where we don't actually have a complete narrative in mind. And if you think about your own life, they're sort of isolated memories, and it's only later on that you construct a story that pieces those memories together. So we have a pile of paper full of various memories. We have to figure out how to put those together in a way that's really going to communicate what we want to say.
Next slide, for real now. So this is an actual page. So I do the whole Alan Moore thing, and just for my own self, but I don't really give it to Tim because I don't want to have an argument. And then I get a really big piece of I buy these really big sketch pads from Dick Blick or whoever has stuff on sale. And then I'll go steal images from the internet, and I go, okay, I want to capture me DJing, because I did DJ. That's one of the things that wasn't in my CV. I've DJ'd. So like I take pictures, and I'm like, I want to capture the Macarena. I want to capture seeing fireworks. I want to capture like West Indians dancing, and DJ Khalid. I want to capture all these other kind of things. And then Tim sketches it, and then do you want to take it from there? Like
a pretty much standard process. I mean, there's a big gap between the roughs and the start of the inking here, where we're sort of wrestling with the story. Wrestling, well, how should your hair look? Because it looks this way to me, but it doesn't look that way to her. So we struggle through that and get those resolved, and then we could go to the inks. And I've been doing the colors digitally lately, just something I've learned to do. I actually tried to start out. I had a range of different markers and paints that I was trying, but it just took too damn long. So this was the only way we could actually get some pages out in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, and that's 4 minutes for us, I guess. So
Okay.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. So you all are working on or completed a memoir. I guess the question is, how did you shape the story that has ended up becoming your memoir? What tells you where to start, where to stop? Were there key moments or images or scenes that made it possible for you to expand from there to tell the story? How do you structure a story out of your life? And anyone, let's hear from all of you, whoever wants to jump in first.
I just start off and have a comment. I actually went to a thing at the Brattle Theater last night with Chris Ware and Linda Berry. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Chris Ware's work, but it's kind of like a big mess of stuff. And you kind of just dive in somewhere and wander around. And his comment about that was, I didn't really understand at the time. I saw the Acme Novelty Library and said, what is this, all these chits of paper in a box? That makes sense. So what he said was, like, when you meet somebody, you don't get their whole life story sequentially. You may shake their hand and say, wow, that was a wet, slimy hand. I don't know about this person. And they may become your best friend, but you don't learn everything all at once. And in terms of our story, we sort of started with some nuggets of information. And in the case of our first 2 chapters, it was birthday parties. That's something we had a lot to say about, other people's birthday parties and the ones that we threw. And that was a starting point, that sort of nugget. It's like, okay, we're going to sort of make that have the gravity and pull everything else towards it, and then work a narrative out from that. When we first started the memoir group, we didn't actually think, oh, this is going to be a memoir. It's just, well, we have a story and it's our own life, so that makes it a memoir.
Well, with my story, I started with my first memory with my biological father, and I worked chronologically from there. It was pretty easy to figure out what I was going to put in and what I was going to leave out for me. And basically, the book is 2 halves. The first half, when I'm younger, around 6 and 7, and then the second half takes place when I'm 16, when my father went to prison when I was 7, and then he got out when I was 16. And so it basically covers 2 years of my life, the first year that I spent with my father and the last year.
And what made you make that choice? How did you make that choice? Because that's a pretty dramatic choice of 7, 16, 2 years.
Yeah, basically it's the 2 years I spent with my father. It really was only about 2.5 years that I spent with him. So
I see.
So that's why I decided to do it like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Makes sense.
My story, since it specifically takes place over the course of a year, it seemed like a pretty clear start and stop, but I still actually really struggled with it. I didn't know how to introduce this house and these people, because it's going to be, I think, pretty people-driven, character-driven. And the first sketch that I was like, okay, I have to put something on paper. I have all of these moments that I remember. but I just went ahead and put something on paper. It was like pretty like abstract and like it didn't have a story arc. It was more like creating the setting. And I showed it to my Graphic Memoir Collective members who their feedback was kind of like, I don't quite know where I am yet. Like, I'm not sure who these people are or how they relate to each other. And I had this one throwaway line in that first draft that was like, and then by the end of the roommate interview, we were all just sitting around without our pants on. And they were like, hold on, can you go back? What? Like, why did that happen? And I was like, oh, it was my idea. And they were like, what? And I was like, oh, I guess that should probably be where I start. and that's become chapter 1. Did that address the whole question?
Yes.
I started in the middle because that was when I took a vacation home to see my dad and my oldest brother and my other brother. And I came home and I couldn't stop talking about it with my mother, and she basically ran down the hall with her hands over her ears screaming, just go write it down or draw it. I can't listen to this anymore. So I did write it down and I did draw, and it was there. Figuring out how to begin the book was really hard for me. I started it over and over and over because I didn't want it to be a big, thick book about being in a mental hospital. I just wanted to, get to the visit home. So I just ended up doing just fast information. This happened, this happened, this happened. Okay, now we're taking the journey home. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Now, what about the depiction of other real people? How did you approach the possible sensitivities, and knowing that you were going to be drawing and writing about other real people, whether they're going to read it or not? How much did you have to take that into account?
I need to start.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, because I just spoke. But that guy that just laughed real loud, he's one of the characters in this book. He's my oldest brother.
Toby.
And it was such a pleasure watching him read himself, because his character's an over-talker, and he just was rolling on the floor, and when he was done reading it, he said, "You have no idea how much I don't say." My family's been really supportive, but I felt...
He's on the cover.
He's on the cover.
Oh, he's on the cover?
He's on the cover.
Let's get the cover.
He's the meditator on the bottom right.
Easy to recognize.
Yeah. But I still felt important, because my stepmother, I'm not really eager to have her read this book, so I felt it was important to change names and physical appearances. Every other member of my family has kind of been supportive. Even the stinky guy, he was like, oh. The one with the cats and the bong, he was like, okay. My other brother. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So this, the idea of representing people that I know well is important to me, and I'm really nervous about it. But I'm doing my best to try and communicate that while I had funny moments with these people, they are three-dimensional humans, and I'm hoping that I can bring out multiple sides as I continue writing this story of my roommates. I've had an interesting challenge, which is some people want to be in it who I don't want to put in it. Not that I don't like them or want to represent them, it's just that they aren't, while I was friends with them at the time also, they aren't necessarily relevant to the story that I'm telling right now in this narrative. And I've sort of been like, yeah, maybe I'll put you in, cool. But I don't know. We'll find out. Yeah, but I of the roommates I'm still in touch with, they're pretty supportive that I'm doing this, and they're excited to be in it. There's one roommate who I am not in touch with, and he's sort of left without a trace, I don't know.
Still owes you money.
He still owes me money. Yeah.
Graphic Memoir is a very safe space. We know exactly what she's talking about, so we're just snickering over here.
Yes, so I don't you know, if I sell enough of this book, it's like he'll have paid me back a little bit. So he's the one I probably care the least about what he thinks because we're not in touch.
All right. Cool. Okay. So I was pretty nervous about telling people that are in the book about the book, and I didn't actually do it until the book had gone to print, except for Troy knew that I was doing it, my brother. And then I told my mother about it, and who I was the most nervous about. And she was confused because she didn't know what a graphic novel was. She thought it was like a prose novel that was graphic. And so then I tried to explain it some more, and then she said, oh, so it's a novel with illustrations. And I'm like, no, it's basically a fat comic book. And she's like, oh, okay. And so she wanted to see it, and me and my brothers were concerned because she lives alone, and we didn't want her to be upset, you know, by herself, because the view from outside her window is of the bank where a lot of this book takes place, and some bad things happen there. So I sent her the book, but she didn't actually read it. She brought it up to my home in Maine with her and proceeded to read it in the living room with us there. And it was a little uncomfortable, and after a few pages, she set it down, and she said she's going to read some more later, and then I took that opportunity to kind of hide it away. She didn't ask for it back until she was leaving, but overall, everyone that was in the book was happy with how it came out and very supportive, and so I feel very lucky.
We have a mixed review for our book because we live in Cambridge, and we are writing about Cambridge, and we're writing about Cambridge as a mixed-race couple raising a mixed-race kid, and you'd be surprised how not woke Cambridge is. So there are things that we're going to be getting into in further chapters, like school. Well, let's talk about chapter 1 and 2. Chapter 1 and 2 are about birthday parties. The first chapter is about other people's gluten-free, fun-free parties. And, you know, if you come down, we don't care if you buy it or not, just definitely look at it. We're telling our truth. Like when our son was 5 in 2005, they were all invited to the gymnasium place over on Concord, and they're like, oh yeah, you're gonna do uneven bars, you're gonna get your Cirque du Soleil on, you're gonna be doing all that like really cool stuff. They were all whisked into a conference room, closed the door. They watched An Inconvenient Truth. This is a bunch of 5-year-olds. And they were given no candy, no swag bag, no cake. They were made to take home their plates. This is in 2005 when the recycling was just becoming a thing in Cambridge. And, you know, go home and share with your parents how you're going to recycle that. And so that's in our book. And, you know, so that's other people's parties. And then I'm Guyanese American, and like as a West Indian, you share, you give food, take all the food. We have food and music, and parents come, and I give them rum, and they freak out because they don't want their kids to see them. I'm like, the kid's over there with a sippy cup. They don't care what you got in this glass. Come on over here and talk with me. And you're not leaving your kid here for 2 hours for me to babysit. I may be brown, but I'm not your freaking nanny. And you know, and so you know, it's like that's basically chapter 2. And anyway, as we tell our story about what this book is about, just 2 weeks ago, I had a woman say, that's not very funny at all. Cambridge has really good people in it. And I was like, bitch, you're chapter 7. Oh. But we are drawing people the way they look, but they don't see themselves as that because Tim is really good with caricature. People are like, oh, this is great. I love this person. And I'm like, oh my God, she didn't. Yeah. That's you. Don't just burn socks, you know? Just, you know, like. Anyway.
So we've had a lot of references to the Memoir Collective, and I'm very interested in that as a group that's come into being in the last couple of years, and how how it's helped you, or assuming you're all going to say it's helped you, I think, and how you work within that group and what it's meant to you. But then we also have Travis, the one lone non-Graphic Memoir Collective. So I guess I guess it's
a T-shirt.
I guess it's a question where we can talk about your group process and maybe compare and contrast and talk about with Travis what sort of feedback, help, or input you've gotten or lacked in the process of creating your books. So jump right in.
I kind of started talking about the process before. We meet once a month, and somebody submits, or two people submit their chapter a week before our meeting. And then we go over the chapter and we figure out everything that we love about it, and then everything that we question. I mean, you can't actually say everything that sucks, but I guess you could. So then we get together and just listening to the feedback separately, hearing just the good stuff first, for me, taught me that there are things I thought I was going to cut. That no, that's actually something that unanimously they liked a lot, and it boosted my confidence because I didn't have much going into this, and I just think the constant feedback and the deadlines really helped me.
Yeah, being a part of this group has definitely helped me as well. I touched on it earlier. They've helped me so much with like nailing down a structure, which I think is going to be far more, I guess, like episodic than I thought it was going to be, which I'm looking forward to. And just the way I can break things down into moments and chapters and build like when to introduce the conflict, and it's just been really great to have other people look at it and see their reactions, and I can build it from there.
Do you, and this is for anyone, do you feel, I mean, I guess the idea, a memoir workshop or graphic memoir workshop seems unique, and it's because it's not only are you dealing with structure and storytelling, but you're dealing with your personal emotional, and realities, and turning that into art. So how has that been part of the process?
That's actually a good thing. Barbara mentioned a little bit that, we know each other's dirt. Over the course of time, in addition to the feedback, we've gotten to know one another fairly well. And that helps us elucidate the individual's voice. I remember Laura at the beginning was like, "Oh, I don't have a story to tell. I'm too young," well, just tell us about stuff that's happened. But we got to know Laura very well, and the feedback isn't so much this is a good story structure or that's a good graphic design, but more like, is your voice coming through in this material? And for a memoir, I think that's a really important thing to have. It does sort of need to be relatable at some level, but most importantly, each of us has been helped by the others to speak more in our own voice. Mine comes out in the pictures. Barbara's very particular about her words and how she expresses herself, and that also comes through in the writing. Those are very important things for us to have captured.
So, okay.
Oh, I have to admit, it sounds very lovey-dovey, our group, but when we first started, and Marty pointed it out a few days ago, I said, I think I'm going to be the first person to attrish from this place. And the reason being was being like one of these things is not like the other up here. I have been in memoir groups before where like I was actually writing short stories. I wrote about a fight that I was on the receiving end of in junior high school in the Bronx. And it was a fight, and we fought like dudes. And I wrote this story, and I was in this memoir group, and this old white dude said, "Girls don't fight like that." And we got into it, and he got up and left the class, and he never came back because he wanted to see it from a white male perspective. And I was like, I'm sorry, life is rated R. I was like, fuck you. And so I said I kind of came in there with this kind of like guard over myself. It's like, I have to tell my truth, and if you don't like it, Tim and I are just going to go take our ball and go play elsewhere. But that has not been the case at all. This is a very accepting group. I have said all kinds of stuff. I cuss like a truck driver, and I don't even know it sometimes. But this group is very supportive, and we can say the things we need to say. That's all.
I just want to add another thing about that first night. I had just retired from teaching high school, and I had not been around grown-ups much. That a Trish talk and some other things that were said, they were grown-ups. I couldn't take them out into the hallway and tell them that they needed to change the way they were talking. I had actually handouts I gave them, and I was terrified. And finally, after we decided we would try it for 3 times and then decide from there. One other thing about memoir is it's very, very personal, and I wanted a group that was a closed group that would meet a lot, and I think that's part of the key to it.
So Tim, Travis, other guy. So what do you make of all this? How does it compare with your process as far as feedback on your book?
Yeah, I didn't have much feedback except for I'd show my wife maybe a chunk after 100 pages or so, and she'd help me out. If things didn't make sense or anything like that was off. But for the most part, I basically drew this book for myself as sort of form of therapy, and then later on, as I was working on it, decided maybe to get it published, and went from there.
Mm-hmm. Did you miss or even think about getting more feedback, support, help?
Well, I thought maybe Drawn and Quarterly would, but they don't really do much of that. They just look for copy edits, mistakes, and they did have a few parts that they helped me out with, but for the most part, they trust the artist. And
I'm sorry, maybe I missed this. Did you pitch this to Drawn and Quarterly, or did you submit the finished book?
I sent them after I had about 100 pages.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then we didn't really sign a contract till after it was done, though, till they seen the finished product.
Okay. We have about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to open it to audience questions as opposed to going further with the written questions. Toby?
Toby. I wanted to ask Travis, when you did your counseling and then you went in, did you have an inkling when you started your book that you were going to feel better, or did that gradually come on, or did that drive you along in the book? Or because you kind of said that, in a sense that counts for obviously the money you paid him, because basically, you did your own therapy.
Yeah, I went through a couple different counselors, so I don't think so much it was the counselor. It was the act of talking about it, and then it was like in the air, like following me around, like the past and the present. It was like coexisting. But then as I started to draw it, it's like, when it got onto the paper, then it was settled, and I felt better almost immediately. And I don't know if it was, part of it was the act, I think the act of drawing itself actually was meditative and soothing, and also the fact that it was almost like a form of exposure therapy, because I was kind of back where I was and re-experiencing it, but in a safe place in my own home and where I felt comfortable. That part too was, I think, part of the benefit.
So when it was on paper, did you stop ruminating about that particular?
Yeah, as the further I got along in the book, the better I felt. And even though I wasn't waking up with panic attacks at midnight, I was still getting up at midnight and drawing. And I just kept that same routine, and I was exhausted during the day, but it was worth it.
Since at least 4 of you have talked about your memoirs or about personal trauma and then translating that or expressing that in art, can you explain about, or just a quick ditty about how you experience the trauma and then figure out when to turn on the craft and when to say, okay, this happened to me, but now I gotta make other people care. I gotta start thinking about process, art, pieces of paper, color, craft. Can you talk about that distance between your realizing your personal experience and getting a story out of it?
I really had a hard time getting to it because I would cry a lot and be very emotional. And what got me over the hurdle was, I'm going to just do this as fast as I can. And I just dug in and I did a page a day, and it took 10 to 12 hours a day. And my poor mother, she lived with me, and she was like, I have to do cooking now. And even that, it was hard. It was very therapeutic, but also hard. And I couldn't second guess the pages either, but it was the best way to do it for me because it just compressed the whole story into, David, you got me. It's not easy to write a memoir. There are a lot of feelings there, and I did have to do it fast and get it over with.
I guess what I've noticed is I think a certain amount of time has to have passed since the topic of the memoir for me. I find that, the material I'm working with happened to me like 5 or 6 years ago, and I couldn't start it any sooner. I thought about it. I mapped out little bits of it in my mind, but I could not put it down on paper until a certain amount of time had passed. And yeah, I hope that.
Yeah. My background is in comic strips for the most part, like gag comics, and so this is a little bit different. But working on the book, I looked at the double-page spread as if it was a Sunday-sized comic strip, and I focused on getting the information that's on that double-page spread as interesting as possible, and just concentrated on that itself and not worry about what came before or after, making that double-page spread look as good as it could.
For us, the first 2 chapters were easy because they were fun and they were birthday party. But as we start getting into it, it's getting more heavy, and the things are still happening. We still live in Cambridge, and so do these people. For instance, school choice. We did pull our child out of CRLS. Come to our table and find out why. But we pulled our child out of the public high school here because he'd get stopped walking while black and things like that. And we put him in private school, boarding school, in fact, because we can't afford it. But the thing was, people were like, I thought you lived in the Ringe Towers. You said you lived in North Cambridge. I thought you lived in those projects. And just little things like that. And they're all coming out, and they're hard for us to write. These next 2 chapters are very hard. We're writing about school choice and just the kind of sideways things that are said to me that Tim doesn't get said to today by neighbors in North Cambridge or just in Cambridge. And so we're in the middle of it. So, things like if Tim took Connor to the park, it was the Big Brother, Big Sister program. But if I took my son to the park, I was the fucking nanny. So, things like that. Our book is about to get heavy, and having the graphic memoir group here to help us, it's like, oh my God, people are gonna feel like we bait and switched. It was so funny the first 2 chapters, and now we're just calling everyone in Cambridge racist. And so we're writing it as we have to. Otherwise, Tim is going to hear me all the time talking about it, because I call it telling the West Indian story. It's like, Gyal, did you hear it? And he's like, you told me yesterday, but Gyal, let me tell you again. No, you told me 2 weeks ago, but I got to tell you again. And so So writing it down, it's kind of like cemented, and he won't have to hear me tell him 17 more times.
Well, I wouldn't say those first 2 chapters were easy.
No, they weren't.
But some of the topics that we had discussed doing, some of the stuff having to do with Barbara's childhood or college years, some of the stuff that I experienced in my early 20s, I still can't deal with. I still probably couldn't put down to paper. At some point I might, but at a certain point, I think, as Travis was saying, the writing therapy or the drawing therapy is done, and it's there on the page, and then it becomes something that you can view a little bit more objectively. In our chapters and piecing them together, I also looked at, here's a 2-page spread or just a 1-page spread, and let me just capture something that's more or less complete within that, and then we'll figure out how to put them together. But it does, that process of writing it out and thinking about it and putting it on paper helps to dissociate it enough to then work with it and start the craft piece.
Yes.
For talking about tough subjects like racism in Cambridge, where I work, and yes. And or sort of parental relationships and mental illness, like how do you prepare yourself for writing down that draft? Do you meditate? Do you take deep breaths, or do you just dive in and sort of deal with that emotional difficulties as they come?
A little bit of rum and reggae, and then I start writing.
Of course, I hear about it for about a week beforehand.
I would, because with the mental illness and also dysfunctional family and things in there, I would bounce around. There was a chapter that just kept getting to me too emotionally, and I would just go back to something fun. And then it did come to the point, I got to do that chapter. You just dig in your heels and you do it. And
Yes.
This is mostly for Travis, but for everybody on the panel. You wrote this book and you didn't tell anybody that you were doing it, no one knew about it. But now it's out and everyone does know. If you continue with another graphic memoir, people are going to know that you're writing about it. What do you think you're going to do differently now that you've done this already, and now that people know that this is what you're going to do? And everyone else here on the panel, you're all presenting it now. Everyone knows what you're doing. How does that change what you're going to do next?
Well, in the one I'm working on now, a lot of the people, the 2 main characters have passed away, so that takes care of that part, but... And then the other character, who's also in this book, Zung, he doesn't care. He's fine with anything, so I'm going to be all right.
the one thing I would do differently is I wouldn't wait 25 years. I'd say the most important thing is to get it out, whether you think it's good or not. My boyfriend is always saying, Steve Jobs says, real artists ship. I don't know, I haven't looked up the quote to find out if that's right, David, but just do it. Even if you can't get a group together, I think fear really blocked me. So my next plan is to start another book right away. You're sweet.
Yeah. I guess I'm still working on this one. So I'll get back to you in a year.
Barbara's actually got a sheet. It showed one of the pages from it here, mapping out like the next 20 chapters. So I think our roadmap is pretty well set.
Yeah, but then there's like a few other like memoirs I'm starting to think about too, because like I had a difficult pregnancy. I had something called hyperemesis, and Princess Kate Middleton did not do justice to talk about it. That she like gave birth and like they had her out in front of the hospital 3 hours later, which was stupid. So I thought she would be the spokesperson for this very not talked about condition. So we will probably be doing something about that. There will be a lot of drawings of me caressing and hugging the toilet and feeding tubes and things of that nature to bring light to it. So hopefully next time this year, if we are, graced with another table, there will be other things, other difficult things that we're talking about. And then we need to tap into you, dude.
I was just wondering, I appreciated hearing Travis's publication story, and I'd like to know some of your other thoughts on actually publishing and the process.
The process was a little time consuming, more than I thought it would be. Mostly because my page is a full bleed, and so when they received the book, they informed me that the edges would be trimmed off like 0.125, and so I had like text on the edges and all that stuff. So I had to redraw. I had to extend all my pages. I did about half an inch, so that took a lot of work. But they were great to work with and really supportive, and yeah, great gang there.
Yeah, so when you mentioned Chris Ware, and I was reading an interview about Chris Ware this morning where he said that something interesting about comics as a medium is that it allows for, like, a certain slow circulation of ideas versus prose. And I was wondering, like, what drew you to comics as a prose?
Well, for me, I did some doodling as a kid, but went along more realistic representational drawing and illustration, but got interested in animation and was fascinated by how these still frames run together rapidly, turned into motion or impressions of motion. If you actually slow down some old Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny cartoon, you see many frames that don't look anything like Bugs Bunny. They look like a hot dog, and somehow that's Bugs Bunny slapping Elmer Fudd across the face. But that's very labor intensive. Animation is like, a lot of work for 5 seconds of oh, neat, on the next thing. So I found the comics or the graphic novel medium to be sort of happy medium between the animation, where it's way too much work, and at the other end where you put all your work into one 4x9 canvas, and that takes you weeks. So that's kind of where I've ended up feeling more comfortable.
I couldn't hear the question.
Was it prose versus comics? The choice, yeah, the choice to work in comics as opposed to writing prose. Did anybody grapple with that?
I'm not a very good writer. My reason that I choose comics is because I used to do theater, and I feel like these are little characters, and I'm drawing a set, and the set is the scenery and the mood. When it comes to writing, that's just not my talent, not my skill.
I studied painting, so I'm coming at this pretty much exclusively from a visual arts background, and I don't really consider myself to be a writer at all, even though there is writing involved. So I guess I kind of am. So that's why I went for comics. I wanted to tell this story, and I wanted to do it in a visual way from the get-go. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of my book is silent panels, just because I'm not comfortable writing with words or narration. So I try to express myself in images.
I write a lot, and then what I do is I slap down those images like we had on that one slide, so I get that big piece of paper, and I can fill Like if the sketchbook is as big as like half this table, I can write in like, 9-point font. I can write. And, but then I was like, oh, wait, I have this picture in my head. I can't draw fast enough. Oh, I'm going to find this picture of like, fireworks. And then I just go to iStock.com or whatever, and I just kind of like find all these pictures. And then I go, Tim, draw that or draw something like that. And I try not to take away his artistic freedom, but I don't want to just describe. And he thusly drew, Charlie Brown at the Macy's Day Parade as a balloon. It's like that balloon at that angle, like that. And so he can take it from there. And so I do a little bit of drawing, but mostly collaging in terms of the images, and then Tim takes it from there.
Can I make a call out to somebody?
Yeah, you're going to call someone out?
Because what I really felt, this is one of the reasons it took a long time, is I felt like I did not know what I was doing. And the first time I came to BCR, I met David Marshall, who's sitting right there, and he said, you need to take my course. So this... And it was a great course. I learned how to use brushes and nibs and inking, and that's why I'm probably still doing inking and not doing the computer stuff that Tim does.
Well, I think that's someone calling to say our hour is up. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't forget to